All right, everyone, and welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. Maybe you grabbed a cup of tea or a coffee, and let's continue on to Kotlin basic syntax and structure. Let's dive in. We have another IntelliJ file here. I've named this one project. And in Kotlin, we have these files that end in this KT structure. So the file name, the end of the file is always named .kt. KT is just short for Kotlin. Okay? Right, let's get started. Firstly, with comments. How do you note a single line comment? Well, a single line comment, you're just gonna use 2 slashes here. We have these 2 lines right here, and that makes a comment. So what happens when I remove one? It is no longer a comment. As you can see, it's active now. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that back in, and it's grayed out, and that's a comment. And comments are very useful for yourself to make notes in your code, and also for any colleague that might be looking at your code and trying to figure out what was your line of thought. Right, let's move on to a multi-line comment then. How do you note that? We have a slash and we have a star, okay? This is a multi-line comment. So what happens when I remove the star? It becomes active. It's no longer a comment. Now it's comment again. It's grayed out and it's multiple lines, and you feel free to add as many lines as you want. Okay, that's it for comments. So next we'll be moving on to functions. Right here at the top of the file, we have this main function. This is the entry point of the Kotlin program, and every Kotlin program starts with a main function. Okay, so it's very important. Fun here is short for function. Then we have main, then we have brackets, curly brace, print ln, ln means line, and then we have brackets and quotation marks. We have a string, so we have a piece of text here, and it's hello world. This is something that we went over in the previous lecture with the hello world exercise, so that might be familiar to you from there as well. But just know that every Kotlin program starts with a main function, and that this is the entry point of your application. All right, so next we are moving on to variables. So below here we have 2 types of variables. We have an immutable variable, that is a val, and it cannot be changed once assigned. So it cannot be changed. So if you assign this value of Alice to this immutable variable val, and you print this name, and then let's say you let's go ahead and I'm just gonna put here Bob. Let's say you did this, right? Well, this code will always print Alice. Okay, once you've assigned something to this variable, it cannot be changed. Okay, now that has its benefits as well. But let's say you did want to change something after assignment. Well, that's why we have this mutable variable called var. Okay, var here, variable, is age equals 25. Okay, and then we're going to print the age, print ln, print line age. It's going to print 25. All right, then we assign 26 to age, the variable here. But what do you know? It's mutable, so it can be changed. So once you're going to print, when you print this again, right, the result or output is 26. Okay, now that would never happen here, right? Because if you try to assign Bob to this variable. And then we're just going to do this properly. So if you compare these, right? Val name equals Alice. Var age equals 25. We're going to print the name. It prints Alice. Over here, we print the age. We get 25. Here, we assign Bob to name. Here, we assign 26 to age. We're going to print the line. Error, you're going to have a bad time because it will always print Alice. Over here, because it's var and it's mutable and it can be changed, you're assigning 26 to it, well, the output is 26. So those are the main types of variables that you're going to want to know for Kotlin. Immutable and mutable. Immutable cannot be changed, that's val, and mutable, var, can be changed after assignment. Next, we'll be going over specific data types. So Kotlin is a statically typed language, and what that means is that you must specify the type of data your variables can hold. Right here we have, as from the earlier part, we have an immutable variable, right? So you can't change it. We have a val here. Val called number. We're going to name it number, right? Let's tell this variable what data type it is. It's an int, right? So int is short for integer, okay? And that's why we have this number here, number 10. 10 is an integer. Next, we have this pi. We just named this variable pi, right? And its data type is double. So double in the context of Kotlin means a decimal number. So for example, 3.14, this is the beginning of the pi. And just remember that double is a decimal number, int is integer, so it just refers to these kind of whole numbers. Next variable we have greeting. Its type is string. String, as you remember from the hello world example, it always refers to text. So we have quotation marks and we have letters that compile text here. Okay, it can be any letters, but obviously usually it is text that is meant to be comprehended by us humans. Next, we have this variable and we've named it is Kotlin fun, and we've assigned this, or actually we've declared this specific data type for it. It's a Boolean, and in this case it's true, but it could also be false. So Boolean values have two options. It's either true or false values. So this is just something that's good to keep in mind, that in Kotlin, you want to declare variables with specific data types. Integer, for example, double, which refers to decimals, string, which refers to text, Boolean, true or false. Next, we'll be going over some basic operations. So you can, as with other programming languages, you can perform basic operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and for example, division. So here we have two variables. They are again immutable, as we learned before. So they're val. If they were var, they would be mutable, so you could change them after they've been assigned, but here they are val. We have a and b. A is 5, b is 10, right? And then we use them in the context of these equations. So we have print line, for example, here a plus b. So that would literally be a because a is 5. So that would be, in this case, the way it would interpret it is 5 plus 10, right? And the output would therefore be 15, right? Because a is 5 and b is 10. And this same logic applies to the other ones as well. So we have so we have 5 minus 10, so the output is -5. We have 5 times 10, so the output is 50. And we have 10 divided by 5, so the output is 2. You can put any values here, and this code will do the rest, okay? So you basically have built kind of a calculator here. Feel free to play around with this, by the way, and just, put different numbers there and maybe, do some advanced stuff. So you could do A plus B, plus A. So making it a little bit more complex. And yeah, just have fun with it. But these are the basic operations for Kotlin. Next, we have this if-else statement that is based upon specific conditions. So let's say, for example, here you have a variable, val, again, that's immutable, called number check. We've named this variable number check, and it's 10, right? And then we have this if statement. So if this variable number check is, greater than 0, this is a greater sign, we're gonna print the text positive number. If it's not, so else, we're gonna print the text negative number. So it is less than 0, then it's a negative number. Again, what I recommend for you to do is take this snippet of code. I've put it in the notes section of this lecture, and just feel free to even just copy paste it into your IntelliJ and just play around with it. If this logic doesn't make sense to you right away, it's okay. Just copy paste it, maybe play around with the numbers, and it will clarify it to you. Okay, but this is the basic premise here. Okay. Next, we have a when statement. And again, here we have a variable. We've named the variable day, and the value of the day is 2. Okay. Then we have a when value. Okay, when day is 1, we're gonna print the text Monday. When it's 2, we're gonna print the text Tuesday. When it's 3, we're gonna print the text Wednesday. If it's not any of these 3, 1, 2, or 3, we're gonna print invalid day. Okay? And the value of this day is now 2, so it would print Tuesday, right? But if it was 4, it would print invalid day. Again, this kind of code is very useful. Let's say you were building an application and you needed to check on a case-by-case basis which day is it, or it doesn't even have to be a day. It could be, a lunch item on a menu. It depends what you're building, right? But it's the same kind of logic that you would apply to it. Next, we're going to move on to loops. So here we have 2 types of loops. We have the for loop and we have the while loop. Let's get started with the for loop. And let's also discuss a little bit about the difference between these loops, although in this case, this use case, they achieve the same output. So they will print numbers from 1 to 5. So a for loop is used to iterate over a range of values, a collection, or an array. In Kotlin, the for loop is concise and powerful, and it's easy to loop through a defined range of numbers. So the keyword here is a range of numbers. So what have we got here? We have the for, so it's a for loop, it starts with 4. Then we have I, and this is a loop variable, and that is going to take on the values from range 1 ... to 5. So the values from 1 to 5 are going to go into this loop variable. And this is a range 1 to 5. And next we have println, and we're just gonna print this loop variable here. So in this case it's I. So the output will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And because 6 is no longer within this range, it will stop right there and then exit the loop. Next we have a while loop, and it will also print numbers from 1 to 5. We have the var here, variable. We have this I, and it is initialized to 1 before the loop starts. And while loop is used when you want to execute a block of code as long as a certain condition is true. Unlike the for loop, which is more declarative, the while loop requires you to manually manage the loop variable. So as you can see here, we have I as the loop variable, but here we have assigned the number 1 to this variable, I. Okay? Then we have while, because it's called a while loop. Of course, we need to use the word while. Then we have I is less than or equal to 5. Then we have print line, and we're going to print the variable. And if the condition is true, it will execute the block of code inside the loop, right? Okay, what is this? We have this I++ right here, right? That is an increment operator, and it will increase the value of I after each iteration. So the loop continues until I becomes greater than 5. So again, this will print 1, then it adds 1 to it. So 1 plus 1, 2 plus 1, 3 plus 1, 4 plus 1, 5. Now it's equal to 5. So I is no longer less than or equal to 5. It's after that it becomes 6, right? So it's larger than 5, so it will exit this loop and it will stop the loop. Now, what are the main differences and use cases? So the for loop is concise and straightforward when you know the exact range or collection you want to iterate over. Use for loops when you need to iterate over a known range of numbers or elements in a collection. So for example, iterating over an array or a list of items, or running a fixed number of iterations. Okay, what about while loops then? The while loop is more flexible because it continues to run as long as the condition remains true, which can be more complex than a simple range. Use while loops when the number of iterations is not known beforehand and you need to repeat an action until a certain condition changes. So the use case here would be you're waiting for user input or an event, or looping until a certain state is reached. So for example, next we're going to move on to this greet function. Let's break down what this code does. So we have fun here, short for function. We named it greet. And then we have name here. So this is the whole thing is a function declaration. And it means that we're creating a function named greet that takes one input parameter, name, of type string, right? When the function is called here in print line hello $name, it prints a greeting message that includes the name provided when the function is called. $name right here is a placeholder that gets replaced with the actual value of the name parameter. So the value in this case, for example, would be Alice. So the output would be hello Alice. And in the second line would be Bob. So the output would be hello Bob. So this is just a placeholder. But the $sign is a very, very, very useful thing. You can use it to basically make a placeholder very easily, and it will always just be replaced with whatever you put in here in the function. Next, we're going to move on to this add function. So we have a function here called add. We have a that's type integer and b that's type integer. And this is the whole line is a function declaration, and we are essentially creating a function named add that takes two input parameters, a and b. They're both of type integer. The integer at the end right here, so this one, refers to the fact that it will return an integer value, right? So it takes two integers and it returns an integer value. And this is the body of the function right here, return a plus b. It calculates the sum of a and b and returns the result. Here is the function call. We have val sum add 3 and 7. It calls the add function with the arguments 3 and 7. The function calculates 3 plus 7 and returns 10, which is then stored in the variable sum. Okay, and then it prints the value. So overall, this function add adds two numbers and returns the result. And when you call add with two numbers, we get their sum. Okay, here's the add right here. So the add function here will perform this operation, and the sum variable here is printed, and that will store the result. Next, we'll be discussing nullable and non-nullable variables. So in Kotlin here, variables can either be nullable or non-nullable, and this helps prevent errors related to null values. And that's actually one of the things that people really like about Kotlin, is that this can actually help prevent those errors related to null values. So what is a nullable variable? Right here at the top, we're going to go over this. So that is a variable that can hold either a value or null. What does null mean? Null means no value or nothing. You actually make a variable nullable by adding a question mark after its type. So here we have variable called nullable name. We've assigned it this data type that is a string, but we've added this question mark, and that means that it's nullable. Okay, so it can be nothing. Initially, this variable holds Alice, but in the second line it is assigned null, and that is allowed. That won't cause any errors. Okay. Next, we have a non-nullable variable, and that is a variable that must always hold a value and cannot be null. If you try to set a non-nullable variable to null, you will get a compilation error. Okay, so here again we don't have this question mark. Right, so here you don't have the question mark like you do in this nullable variable. We don't have the question mark here, so it's non-nullable. This line here creates a variable named non-nullable name that must always hold a string value. Initially it does. It holds the value of Alice. But in the second line, it's commented, and which is commented out, because if you try to uncomment it, it will cause a compilation error. Okay, let me just see it already, it's underlined, right? And if you tried to run this, it would it would cause an error. So why does this even matter? Well, nullable variables allow flexibility but require careful handling to avoid null pointer exceptions. They're useful when a variable might not have a value at some point. What about non-nullable variables? What about non-nullable variables? Well, they ensure that the variable always has a... What about non-nullable variables? What about non-nullable variables then? Well, they ensure that the variable always has a valid value, which makes the code safer and helps prevent errors related to null. So, in summary, nullable variables, which are characterized by this question mark, can hold a value or they can hold null. Non-nullable variables, like right here, must always hold a value. So in this case, it does hold the value of Alice. But setting it to null is not allowed and it will cause an error. Understanding the difference between these variables can help you write safer and more flexible code in Kotlin by clearly indicating when a variable can be empty and when it must always have a value. I hope this was clear, and I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for finishing. I'm so proud of you for finishing this lecture. I hope to see you in the next one. Please go ahead and reward yourself with a small break. Have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea, and maybe, stand up a little bit, maybe stretch. You can even go out for a short walk if it's a nice weather outside. And guys, I'll see you in the next lecture.